The position of a wreck on the presumed spot of the sinking is clearly marked on marine charts. But is it really HMS Hermes? Felician Fernando is forced to admit that the information he has gathered is not all reliable. A former fishing skipper tells him the identity of the ship is not confirmed, and also the coordinates of this wreck are not exact.
This is the place where the ship was.
Apart from organizing a proper expedition and raking the zone with powerful sonars, the challenge to find HMS Hermes is a crazy, even impossible one. Felician doesn't have the means required for such a search. How could he find the wreck of his dreams, this giant rusting hull in the immensity of this tumultuous ocean? In order to get a better understanding of the tragic fate of this flagship of the Royal Navy, we go to Yeovil in the south of England. The director of the Fleet Air Arm Museum, Graham Mottram, is waiting for us.
Hermes was designed from the keel up, with its hull being modified to take a flight deck. All the other ships prior to that had been modified when they'd been three-quarters built.
The First World War is at its height, and HMS Hermes is promised a great future. But its construction was not complete till 1919. The armistice is signed before she is launched. Later, its audacious tarmac can accommodate 15 planes, which allows it to ensure patrols throughout the British Empire and on all the seas in the world. In the middle of the Second World War, in 1942, the Hermes joined the British fleet in Ceylon. This strategic island is to become a merciless theatre of conflict because Japan has just entered the war. On December the 7th, 1941, Japanese squadrons make a surprise attack on the American base of Pearl Harbor. 4 months later, as the world still reels from the shock, the Japanese pilots are heading towards the British ships and targets in the Indian Ocean.
Once Japan had attacked Pearl Harbor, it was obvious that they had huge military ambitions, and it didn't take long for them to make massive progress.
Back to Sri Lanka, to Trincomalee on the east coast. The former British military base is still there. This is where Winston Churchill must halt the Japanese offensive if he wishes to protect the supply routes to Europe. So at this moment, a real trial of strength is taking place.
Ceylon was seen in some ways by the Japanese as the British equivalent of Pearl Harbor. It needed to neutralize the naval bases in Ceylon so that it could have free reign in the Indian Ocean.
Let's recap the events preceding the sinking of HMS Hermes. On the 4th of April 1942, a British reconnaissance plane is flying over the coast of Ceylon. It comes nose to nose with a fleet of Japanese aircraft carriers. The pilot just has time to alert his base before being shot down. Unlike Pearl Harbor, the British very quickly realize what is afoot. In Sri Lanka, this colonial period is a distant memory. But to carry out his search and find the wreck, Felician Fernando must go back in time to understand what happened during the last days of the Hermes. It's in Batticaloa, the coastal town nearest the sinking, that he finds one of the rare surviving witnesses. On the day of the sinking, Prince Kazenada watches the ballet of the Japanese bombers from the beach.
So this is supposed to be the flight deck.
68 years later, this terrifying day remains etched in his memory.
On the ground, so that could be the crow nest, and it's now tilted because it's almost inverted.
That all the people were in a panic. They had already heard of the atrocities of the Japanese who conquered Malaysia and Singapore.
To avoid a disaster like that of Pearl Harbor, the British High Command decides to evacuate the ports. The Hermes leaves its aircraft on land and puts to sea to try and escape its fatal destiny. But on the morning of the 9th of April 1942, the fearsome Japanese squadron takes off.
When that day dawned, I could hear some sounds of gunfire, and I don't know whether it was of exploding bombs.
The Japanese planes dive bomb the port of Trincomalee. The pilots notice the absence of the Hermes. By chance, they fly southwards, and there they spot the defenseless ship.
There was Hermes. She didn't have any fighter cover aboard. She couldn't launch a swordfish. She didn't have a great deal of anti-aircraft armament. When 85 very determined, experienced dive bomber pilots got her in their sights, sadly, there could only be one end.
With the first bomb that fell on the deck, the HMS Hermes began to sink.
HMS Hermes is hit more than 40 times.
It's obvious to anybody who had a brain that, 5 minutes into the attack, that effectively the ship was doomed and it was only a matter of time.
The Hermes is nothing more than a floating coffin. Its hull sinks below the water in less than 15 minutes. The 600 survivors are marked for life by the sight of the carrier swallowed up by the waves. The wreck now lies in 60 meters of water. Felician Fernando knows he is nearing his goal. Prince's account is far from detailed, but he leaves with one certainty: the identity of the wreck.
When Prince Kasinada said he saw the Hermes under fire, then he was really telling me that I knew that it is the HMS Hermes.
With no sonar and with a simple GPS, Felician crisscrosses the whole area indicated by the erroneous coordinates on the British Marine charts.
When I finally went there, it was not there. No trace of it.
It's an ancient Sri Lankan fisherman's technique that will help him. For the initiated, the least movement in the water, the slightest underwater relief is perceptible. Only if you know how to listen to the old paddles made of yak wood.
I took it to my ear and we could feel the sound of a wreck or a rock or a reef. And nothing, no sound, nothing. Then with the boat we moved very slowly. And then when we stopped, suddenly that cracking sound came. It was kara 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 kara, something like that. And it's I know it's the reef. Either it's a reef or a rock or at least a ship. This one. When I was going down, I could see 25 meters, but nothing to see. Then I went about 25 meters, looked up, nothing to see, endless visibility. Then went a little bit further, cracking noise was still there. Then I saw some fish. Then I knew there's either a wreck or a reef is there. I went towards the fish. Then when I went further, the first appearance was a big egg shape, like a rubber ball, both sides total white in color.
And then, just there below the white coral, it really is the shape of a giant ship that looms into view.
I saw a big box. I was really curious to see what that is. When I went closer, it was like a cartridge, those shells. And I saw some kind of a bow or something pointing out like this. Then I went closer, it was like a cannon. That was an anti-aircraft gun, 5.5 inch. That was the ship that I was looking for many, many years, and I knew I really got it. It is an amazing dive. People have done a lot of things. People have lived here, but a lot of people have not seen what they should see in their life.
With his modest means and his perseverance, Felician is determined not to stop here because he knows that the Sri Lankan coasts hold many more surprises. By finding HMS Hermes, our passionate diver pays, in his own way, a final homage to the shipwrecked mariners of the 9th of April, 1942. An overweening English admiral? An unlucky hospital ship? Or a war machine falling victim to a devastating aerial attack? These 3 stories of sinkings demonstrate that once again the reality often lies hidden in the archives, between the lines of forgotten documents, and sometimes in the memories of survivors or those who seek at all costs to know the truth.